Welcome to this week's edition of the Cardinal Podcast. Rob Rains here, STLSportsPage.com, joined by Mike Rains. Last edition of this podcast before spring training officially gets underway. Mike, we're almost time to go.
We're getting there. We're so close. February 13th will be here before we know it.
Less than a week away from the Cardinals pitchers and catchers, many of them already assembling in Jupiter, Florida, but the team first workout officially for February the 14th. Then we'll be on the ground in Jupiter for the first full squad workout on the 19th. So it'll be right around the corner. And we also know that it's getting closer to the start of spring training when you start seeing all of the statistical analysis. The so-called experts make their predictions on what's going to happen for this season, both individually, the numbers that we can expect the Cardinal players to put up, as well as other guys around the big leagues, as well as the overall win totals. Fangraphs and Baseball Prospectus out with their numbers. The PECOTA rankings, always something that people talk about. So, Mike, I know you've had a chance to look at those the last couple of days. It seems like everybody that we've seen so far kind of projecting the Cardinals to be around 85 wins for this season.
Yeah, and I know how much you really love diving into the sabermetrics numbers and the analytics to compare it, the old school mentality versus the new school mentality of how things will actually play out. But it is interesting to see everybody has them right around 85 wins, which is probably about right. That's what you've been saying the entire time. So
I was saying, anytime I see anybody, they ask me, what my win total, just give me a number for the year. And I've been stuck on 85, which obviously would be a much better season than a year ago, but probably not as many wins as Cardinal fans would want. And the question, of course, is, would that be enough wins to win the division?
Yeah, if you look at the numbers specifically that Fangraphs put out, they have them at a 35.9% chance to win the division, which is the highest in the Central. Cubs are second at 20%. So, would we take that? It bears the question that you've brought up before of what year and what mentality do you take with this team of just try to make the playoffs or try to win the whole thing?
Yeah, we're going to get into some of that conversation in just a second, but I think some of the individual numbers are interesting too, because I think when you were going over this list with me, didn't you say they project 7 different players to hit 20 or more home runs this season?
One of the particular stats that I was looking at had 6 different guys there. Yeah.
6. Okay. 6.
And had Nolan Gorman leading the club at 28.
But then you had kind of downgraded even with Sonny Gray and Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson still downgraded the pitching a little bit.
Yeah, the pitching, when you look at it, it's a little bit interesting. They got 12 wins for Sonny and 11 for Kyle, Lance, and Miles, and 8 for Steven Matz. So if you're looking outside of that, there's not really any big ace carrying you through here, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, as I said, I'll get into in a second, but I'm remiss in not opening the podcast by welcoming our new sponsor, and you can see their logo on the screen here with underneath Mike's picture. Archwell Health, a place that Sally and I both go to for our medical coverage, is coming on board as a sponsor, and we want to welcome them, joining, of course, our 2 main sponsors, the Drury Hotels and AAA of Missouri, and sponsoring our podcast, our weekly podcast, and you'll be hearing much more about Archwell and some other special things that we're going to be doing with their sponsorship coming up in the next couple of 3 weeks. So stay tuned for that. But want to welcome them to the podcast. Looking forward to having a great relationship with them.
I'll be very curious to talk to them throughout the year as guys get hurt and get injured, to hear different perspectives of how things happen. We can get some update on, Donovan and Edmund throughout the year. It might be nice to get another perspective outside of the Cardinals too. Yeah,
so we're looking forward to that. So as I say, you'll be hearing much more about them and how we're going to work with them over the course of the season, as far as on the podcast, as well as just elsewhere on the website. Speaking of the website in general, hopefully you had a chance to read the story I posted yesterday about Riley O'Brien and Ryan Fernandez, 2 of the relief pitchers that will be competing in spring training for a job on the ball club. So I have an interesting story to tell, kind of something in common between those 2 guys. So if you haven't had a chance to read that, be sure to check it out as well. I want to congratulate Ross Williman, who won our newsletter contest last week. You got 2 free tickets to one of the spring training games coming up down in Florida. So if you're not a subscriber to the newsletter or subscribing to our YouTube channel, you can do those very easily on the website. And I'll stay tuned for all future contests and everything that we have coming up do a lot of that stuff through the newsletter, which comes out usually once a week. So, all right. So now we're into our main topic of this edition of the podcast.
Before you jump into that real quick, as we talk about the bullpen and we talk about spring training,
yes,
that's one of the keys that I'm really looking forward to watching this spring is how it shakes out. Because that right now there's too many pitchers to make this club. And so who's going to be the odd man out?
Odd men out, actually. I think there are probably 12 candidates for 8 relief spots. And you figure probably, the Helsleys, Gallegos, Romero, those guys are probably locked in, as well as the newest reliever, Keenan Middleton. They finalized that deal last week. And then as well as the Kittredge, the guy they got from Tampa Bay. Those guys are probably on the team barring an injury. But you got past that, and I think it's going to be wide open. I think it's going to be the most fascinating story of the spring as this team sits right now.
You look at 2 guys that were used an awful lot last year, and Andre Palante and Giovanni Gallegos, and you just wonder, are they going to get the same respect and role that they were in because they were used so much, or are some of these new guys going to come in and kind of push them out of the way? I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch.
I do too, and we'll be down there to cover it all as it happens. But speaking of the bullpen, speaking of pitching, and you mentioned it a minute ago about the Cardinals' traditional model as they build a ball club, and they've said it for years. Bill DeWitt has always said it. John Mozeliak has said it, is we want to have a team that should win, be competing for the division championship, because you always view the playoffs as a crapshoot. So if we could get into the playoffs in October, then you just take your chances about what will happen. Now, some fans are okay with that. And as the projections that we mentioned right now, even though their win total is just projected to be around 85 wins by most observers, that still has them winning the NL Central and getting into the playoffs. Where, what did you say? The one comparison was they have a 2% chance to win the World Series right now.
That's what it says as of right now, according to Fangraphs.
So there's the argument. Do you want which do you want? Now, if you want a team that has a chance to win the World Series, this has been a recent development. It's just come up in the last couple of days. There's a free agent pitcher on the market who has expressed interest in pitching for the Cardinals at a salary of the minimum salary, incentive-based contract, minimal risk from a financial standpoint involved, a 1-year deal, but it does come with a little bit of baggage, and that's Trevor Bauer.
The one thing that's been interesting about this ball club is they've got a few more guys that they've picked up this offseason and guys that they've added in Wilson Contreras that are a little bit more outspoken and not afraid to say what they want to say. And Trevor Bauer absolutely fits that mold of someone that's not afraid to say what he's going to say. Now, if you take the off the field stuff and look at him as separately, on the field, your 2020 Cy Young winner, he's could be an ace of a ball club for a lot of different teams. I assume he's been near the top in strikeouts somewhere too. I don't know what the exact numbers would be, but had to have been pretty close in some of those.
His last 2 years that he was in the big leagues was 13-9 record. It was 20 and 21, 13-9 record, 2.24 ERA, 28 starts, struck out. And remember, that was part of the reason there's so few starts is because of the shortened 2020 season. Struck out 237 batters in 180 and 2/3 innings. So,
and if you're trying to fit the average age of this starting rotation at 35, he fits right in at 33. So
yeah, he would lower the age of the average. Well, yeah, because he would be 1 year older than Matt's, I think.
Yes.
But here's how this came up in the last 24 hours as we record this on Thursday afternoon. Is Bauer was on social media and somebody had said something to him about, expressing an interest in him pitching for the Cardinals or on social media. And his response was, I would love to, this is off on X, formerly known as Twitter. I would love to, Bauer wrote, Sonny Gray is one of my favorite guys in baseball. Cards haven't offered me a contract though. Now he pitched with Gray in Cincinnati a few years ago. That's where that reference comes from.
And obviously 29 of their ball clubs haven't offered him a contract either. So it's got to take somebody that's willing to do that. Now, off the field, certainly there's been some issues there, right? Now, the mess that he got into with the female in LA has come out that it was she's the one that caused the problem. It was not him. He was found guilty and did not have to pay her a dime for anything. And it came out that she was trying to extort him for money. So in that sense, he should be forgiven a little bit, right? And
the potential criminal charges were dropped, and the other litigation has been resolved. Court records are sealed, so you don't know how it was resolved. But there's no more pending litigation from anything that happened there. He has served his suspension from Major League Baseball for the allegations of sexual, domestic abuse. Is there some risk involved with the signing of a guy like this? And I'll be frank. I've been one guy who has said all along that there's no chance that the Cardinals would take a chance, sign him, and probably should not sign him. But the more you think it a little bit, when him willing to say this, you really are not having much financial risk. Are you taking a risk that something could happen off the field? Probably, but you never know. I mean, and then again, if he's innocent of accused of something but was not found guilty of that, then doesn't he deserve a second chance?
I would agree, and I would think he deserves that chance. Now, the two question marks that are interesting to me is one is, through all of his time in Cleveland, Mo has been known to do a lot of deals with Cleveland. So has Mo been on the phone or talking through his due diligence to find out what they think of him there, based on just his attitude and how he was as a player there? The other one that's interesting is when we look at off the field issues. There's a player of the Atlanta Braves who was here for a little while, Marcelo Zuna, who's had a lot of issues and was actually arrested, but yet a lot of people seem to look the other way and let him keep going. So how is this one any different when Trevor was actually found innocent?
And you also have to look at the fact that, even though we all want our guys to be really good, I mean, baseball, Major League Baseball is not filled with, all Eagle Scouts. I mean, it is, a group of 25, 26 men on each team, and probably some of them have more issues than we know of. There are things that happen. And so, but I'm saying if you only have to give him a minimum salary, obviously it's an upgrade to your pitching staff if he pitches well. But if something happens, you cut him. I mean, the financial risk is minimal, and you don't have to give up a prospect. You don't have to give up, a lot of money for a lot of years. He went on to put the rest of his comments on X, formerly known as Twitter, comparing himself to Blake Snell, obviously the current National League Cy Young winner, who's still waiting on a contract as well. Blake Snell is going to get hundreds of millions of dollars on a multi-year deal, and he deserves it. For a team that doesn't want to commit multi-years, hundreds of millions of dollars, or many elite prospects for a Cy Young winner, that's obviously reference to what you would have to trade to get Dylan Cease in here. They could sign me for a league minimum and pay zero incremental dollars over what they have to pay to that roster spot anyway. Just another option for teams that want to win and don't want to break the bank. And I also think you would be getting a guy who's very motivated with a high incentive to want to pitch well.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of times a guy having a chip on his shoulder is not a bad thing, right? Because he wants to go out here and prove that he's not that guy and prove that he's a guy that can step in, do well, and not be the distraction off the field he was. So I think there's some incentive for him as well to pitch well and pitch with some class at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm. I think, and he also probably knows, I would think, if he has, if he's intelligent about the situation, he's seen the fact that his teams are not jumping all over themselves to try to sign him, and he knows he has to be on his best behavior if he wants to get more than one more shot at pitching in the big leagues. I have two other general thoughts about this. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask a question too, but you finish your thoughts.
My two thoughts are this. Number one, okay, he's expressed that he would like to pitch with Sonny Gray. We don't know what Sonny Gray feels about this. And if I'm John Mozeliak, the first call I make before I pursue anything is I pick up the phone and I call Sonny Gray, or I wait, see him showing up in Jupiter and go have a personal one-on-one conversation. What would you think about when you were Trevor Bauer's teammate in Cincinnati? What would you think about him coming and joining the Cardinals? Because you'd have to get Gray's endorsement before I think you go forward. But then I think you pick up the phone and you at least kick the tires and say, what do we think? I think you have to do that. And because I think the trickle down effect of, putting him in the rotation makes the rotation better, makes the bullpen better. And as I say, and I also think this has been a fan base that has been clamoring for one more additional starting pitcher to be on top of that rotation. Here he is. Okay. What would the fan reaction be to signing Trevor Bauer? I think it would be mixed. I think there would be some people who want to win, thinks he can help you win. They're willing to put the off the field issues aside unless he gets into more trouble once he comes here. I think there are some people who would probably, but then again, they may not be buying tickets anyway, who would be very much against the signing and be disappointed and upset that the Cardinals signed him. I think the reaction would be mixed.
The one thing to that end too is, does winning fix everything? A lot of opinions seem to change on people when the team is winning. Last year there were a lot of opinions about how bad this team was because they were not doing well. If Trevor Bauer was to come into this team and all of a sudden get 15, 18 wins as a starter for this team, would you look at it very differently and say, yeah, I'm very happy we got him? And I assume that answer is yes.
I think as long as he's on good behavior and doesn't cause any more problems.
My question for you, though, is obviously you cannot compare these two apple to apples because the positions are slightly different.
Mhm.
But if you're looking at a final roster spot for the Cardinals this year at a league minimum salary, which player do you think could have a bigger impact on this ball club? Trevor Bauer or Matt Carpenter?
Trevor Bauer.
I understand there's the
And just
clubhouse
look at
mindset of
the
what
13 pitchers. Don't even compare the two of them. Compare who would be the 13th pitcher on this roster in the bullpen, which we don't know the answer to that, versus Trevor Bauer. Interesting.
probably somebody like a John King, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I
don't know who that 13th guy would be.
Well, yeah, because it could be Fernandez, it could be O'Brien. We don't know yet. I mean, there's too many candidates for that role, and that's one of those things they'll be shaking down in spring training. But I do think, take all the non-baseball stuff out of the equation. You've got a guy in Trevor Bauer, former Cy Young winner, still healthy, pitched last year in Japan, so it's not like he hasn't pitched for 2 years. He did pitch in Japan last year. You can get him for the minimum salary. I think you got to take the chance.
And I would agree with that. I think you do too. I think the other question too is, as we compare other pitchers that may be out there, are we getting to the point where Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery would entertain 1-year offers as well because they just want to play?
I don't think so. I don't think we're to that point yet, especially with Scott Boras as the agent.
And I would agree. So that's what I'm saying. The risk aspect to someone like Trevor Bauer, to me, doesn't seem as high as it previously looked maybe last year, right? Now looking at it and seeing all the things that were working against him and how this female colluded to cause these issues towards him, from a cost standpoint compared to what he could bring you on the field, seems to me like an absolute no-brainer.
I think somebody's going to sign him. I don't know that it's going to be the Cardinals, but I think it's reached the point where if he's willing to pitch for the minimum salary and all these things are true, I think there is going to be a team out there that takes the chance to sign him.
And like you said before, if you want the Cardinal fans that have been, screaming from the top of the rooftops, we need another pitcher, we need to sign somebody, we need to do something decent, this would certainly answer that call for a lot of those fans.
I agree. So it will be interesting. That's one of the stories that we'll be watching here for the next few days. I would suspect, as we get pitchers and catchers, not only reporting for the Cardinals camp in Jupiter, but reporting in Arizona and throughout Florida for all of the other 29 teams as well. You're going to see other teams, starting to kick the tires on this and see what they can do. So stay tuned. We'll find out. So.
I'm looking forward to a lot of stories in, this spring, right? Obviously not having the World Baseball Classic. You're going to have every pitcher there the whole time to work with Wilson Contreras. You got some new guys coming in. So I think there's a lot of interesting storylines to watch this spring.
I do too. And then one of them, you just mentioned before we came on the air as well, Ivan Herrera, who was scheduled to be Wilson Contreras' backup this season, had been playing in the Caribbean Series for his native Panama, has 2 home runs and has played very well. So that's encouraging to see what kind of performance he's had down there.
Yeah, for sure. And the other one that I'm curious to see is, we talked about some of these other guys. We talked about it last time, the Alfonso Rivas signing that we made and some of these other guys that, it seems to me like there's a log jam of, I don't want to say bench players, but a few left-handed DH first base bench players. Right. So who is going to come in and produce and win that spot? A lot of guys think that Matt Carpenter has the edge because he's, got the mindset in the clubhouse, but he's still got to perform.
Sure. Yeah. So, all those questions will start to be answered next week. As we've mentioned, we'll be on the ground in Jupiter to cover that. We'll still be doing our weekly podcast here with Mike as far as looking at what's going on in spring training, as well as full features, full game reports, postcards. We'll be back with the Jupiter Minute every day as well during the spring training exhibition season. So a lot of coverage coming up here on STLSportsPage.com. Thanks to Archwell Health. Again, welcome them as our new sponsor, along with Drury Hotels and AAA of Missouri, with our other sponsors, Nuremberg Hardware, as well as Crawford Butts Insurance, MP Insurance. So we appreciate everybody's support here on the podcast and throughout the website for helping us get down to Florida and be down there for the month to give you full coverage. So, Mike, thank you as well. We'll be back with next week with another edition of the Cardinal Podcast. This is Rob Raines reporting for STLSportsPage.com.